Welcome to episode 104 of Eat, Drink, Write, an Urban Fantasy Whiteboard. Today, we're going to be talking more about writing descriptions. Now, a lot
Yeah,
of our episodes have touched on descriptions within whatever that topic was,
right.
but we thought we would delve more into actual writing descriptions. And I think we can probably do several more episodes. There's so much out there on
Yeah,
writing
for sure.
descriptions. But first, how was your week? Probably the same as last week.
Oh, it's so busy. Yeah. Busy and just like getting more and more stressful as I'm getting closer to graduation. There's a billion things to do and I feel like I don't have enough time in the world to do them. So,
Mm-hmm.
um, that's pretty fun. But one important thing, I finished the first draft of one of my books. I have learned that I write a lot more when I'm extremely stressed, which is I think hilarious because it takes time to write, but I think it keeps me a little bit sane.
Yeah, it takes you away from the real world for a while, which everybody
Yeah.
needs. So that's awesome. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. I think I've mentioned it a few times on here. It's the Ara books that I'm working on. I'm not going to go into any detail on those because it still needs a lot of work and it'll be a very long time before it's ever published. So,
Yeah, this one's going to be very complex. Your
mhm.
whole plot ideas are
Uh-huh.
amazing. I can't wait to see how you put it together. I don't
They're going
even
to be
know the whole plot lines anymore because you've changed it since we've talked
uh-huh.
about it. So I'm
Yeah.
that's very exciting.
Thank
Oh, I'm
you.
proud of
Thank
you.
you so much. I'm excited
Wow.
too. I'm very excited to rewrite it. That definitely won't happen until after graduation. So it'll be a
Yeah.
couple of months before I revisit it. But in the meantime, since I still need writing to, appease my stressed brain,
Yeah.
I am working on um, another of my novels at the moment, and I've added somewhere around 5,000 words in the past week. So,
That's amazing. Yeah, no, I've been tied up with I got court next week, all week, my chaos court.
mhm.
Um, the week after that, we've got a mandatory seminar that I've got to go to. That'll be 4 days. So
Yeah.
I'm trying to get everything caught up before I have to get bogged down with all of that. So no writing for me, unfortunately.
Yeah, I hear you.
What are you eating and drinking? You're home
Wait, how
early
was your
today.
week? I
Oh,
am. Wait, yeah, how was, well, hold on. How was your week?
it's the same. Just swamped trying to get ready for stuff. I have been starting to play with some new crafts, which is fun.
Yes, very fun.
Yeah. So I'm having a good
Nice.
time with that. That's, I guess, my stress reliever
Oh, yeah,
is,
doing the crafts.
your poor father. I've set up my jewelry station up in the living room. And so I've got beads and wires and all these things everywhere.
I bet he loves that.
Yeah. He doesn't say anything because he's a good husband, but
Yeah.
um, it's been fun. I've been making rings that I was able to take up to Helen and learning, getting better and better at the wire work, which is
hmm
very fun. Um,
Nice.
so yeah, that's all I've been doing. Just don't have enough time to, I haven't even read in forever. No reading,
Yeah.
no writing, no nothing. I just, I do listen to some podcasts I love, and that's why we drink.
Yeah. Yeah.
I try to listen to our podcast so that I can see if we're doing a good job or not.
We're doing a job at least.
We're doing a job. We're here, y'all. Um, so
but
that was my
yeah,
week. So what are you, since you're home early today,
I am.
working on your thesis, what are
Yes.
you eating and drinking?
I am not eating anything. I have no clue. I think it's salads for dinner tonight, but since it's so early, I'm not eating anything yet.
Mm-hmm.
We did make this amazing like fajita style chicken for dinner one night that I had for lunch not too long ago at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And it was super, super yummy. So rice and beans and chicken and fajita veggies and it was delicious.
Yum.
Cayenne pepper and all that jazz. So
Are you drinking anything fun? But since you're working, are you?
I'm not drinking anything with alcohol, so not that kind of fun, but I did so another one I'm learning a lot about myself as I'm very stressed these days.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing that I like to do while I'm stressed is just like make various things. So like I like to cook and I like to just like make drinks and stuff. So I brewed a whole giant pot of tea for some sweet tea, or if it's not sweet tea, I didn't put any sugar in it, but some iced tea, just like a for a pitcher
Oh,
of iced tea.
nice.
So I'm drinking some iced tea. It's just black tea. And then I put some vanilla syrup in it, and
Oh,
it's very
how
good.
interesting. I never
Yeah.
really thought of putting syrups in teas. I'd put
Uh-huh.
syrups in the coffees.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's
Interesting.
right. And it's my fiance's vanilla syrup because she uses it for her coffee
Coffee.
lattes. And I was like,
Hmm.
you know what? I'm gonna put some in this iced tea because I didn't put any sugar in it, but I wanted something sweet. And so I was like, you know what? I'll do that. And it's very good. And I think
Who
next time
knew?
I know, I think next time I would add we have some almond milk. So I
You
would
know,
probably
it,
add that in.
it's kind of like English breakfast tea, except for iced. So
Yeah, and anytime that I go to like Dunkin' or Starbucks or, any coffee
I
chain,
always put
whatever,
milk in.
I
Yeah.
I even an iced tea though, and people just give me
Oh,
the weirdest look. I
I
put creamer in my
never
iced
knew
tea.
that. I
Yeah.
have never thought of that. Although I love iced lattes, which is
Right.
hello,
Yeah.
cream.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah,
Oh,
no, that's just a weird thing that I do. And I know a lot of people give me a lot of very funny looks when I'm like, can I have cream for my iced tea? Okay, thank you. Bye.
oh,
So
that's
next time
funny.
I think I would probably put some almond milk in it, but right today it's just some straight tea with vanilla syrup.
Well, it doesn't have a color like is the vanilla syrup not white?
No, it's just
Huh.
clear syrup.
Interesting. I've
Yeah,
never tried that.
it's very
Well,
good.
I needed a drink today, so I am drinking some of my wine. It's the sparkling. I think this one is Corbel pink
Oh, good.
champagne or pink sparkling wine. It's not
Yeah.
champagne, but that was what I felt the need of today. And then for dinner, I'm going to be making there's a keto um, lasagna.
Ooh.
And I don't know why they call it lasagna. It has no noodles in it
Oh,
because
okay.
we're keto and we
Because
can't
keto.
eat noodles, but it is excellent. It's got um, ground sausage
Mm.
and ricotta cheese, and oh my God,
That
it's so
sounds
good.
okay. Listen, I want
So
that. Just ship some my way. I will
yeah,
gladly take some of that.
and it's easy. You just do it in a cast iron skillet, all one pot. So
Oh,
it's
nice.
very easy to do. And then you throw it in the oven to let the cheese on top melt. My mouth is watering. So that's what we're having for dinner tonight.
Well, that sounds fantastic.
But it is early, so not yet.
True, 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 true. Yeah, I think we're doing salads, or we're doing like we're doing like another chicken dinners, like Italian chicken or something.
Okay, fun.
Yeah, yeah.
All right. So writing descriptions, start us
Writing,
off.
writing descriptions, absolutely. So description obviously comes with the territory of writing a novel.
Mhm.
You can't really go anywhere with a novel without using some kind of description in some form or fashion.
Or you
Um,
can, but it would be,
yeah, I suppose you're right. You can, but would it be enjoyable? I don't know.
I mean, even scientific writing has descriptions.
It does. It does.
So
In scientific writing, which I do a lot of, is a lot of very dry writing, but everything has to, it's still a story. Like there is still descriptors of how you do your experiments and things. So I
and
don't think you can,
you have to have your audience want to read it, even
right.
scientists,
Even scientists. And yeah, so like no matter what type of writing you're doing, there's probably, some kind of quote unquote story. And maybe I just view the world under that lens of stories. But,
Yeah, we are
I
fiction writers, so that happens.
right. And so, you're not really going to get much of anywhere in writing without some kind of descriptors.
I mean, even legal writing, when I do my briefs and memos and that kind of
Yeah.
thing, it has to be entertaining for the judge to be able to get through it.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Yeah. So
But yeah, so we haven't really discussed description on this podcast though, like the ways that we can use it to enhance our writing. So I thought it'd be a really good
mhm.
opportunity to do so. Mostly because recently I saw a post in a writer group that I'm a part of, on one of the social media platforms, and somebody asked, do you prefer more description or more dialogue when you're reading a book? And my immediate thought was, well, I'll get to that in a second. But I saw a variety of answers from, I don't like much description. Description's too heavy. I don't care for it. I'd rather have more dialogue than description, and, et cetera. Just like a lot of answers along those lines. And, the way that I think about it though, is like, you can't really get away with just dialogue alone.
or description. You
or
can't,
description alone. There's
yeah,
got to be a balance between the two. You
for
can't just have
sure.
one or the other.
Yeah.
And you might enjoy conversations between characters more or whatever, but like I think you still need both description and dialogue in order to carry a story, especially
Yeah.
like urban fantasy like we write, for
I
sure.
agree. I can't imagine one or the other. I mean, I guess the question was, do you prefer,
Mhm.
so which one do you like better? But
Yeah.
I don't think that I can answer that I like either one better because both are needed.
Right. Yeah.
And there needs to be a balance, and you need to also shake up how you do the pacing that we talked about. You've got to put, this part might have more dialogue because that's what that needs, and this part might not have dialogue. It might be
Right.
more description,
Yeah.
like when Gandalf and the Hobbit, I mean, in the Lord of the Rings, and yeah, the Gandalf and the Hobbits were walking up the mountain and the camera zoomed out and you're seeing them. There was no discussion going on. There was no
Right.
dialogue because they couldn't talk with all of that.
Yeah.
So in
Yeah.
that particular scene, it needed to be the description of the the mountain and the snow
And the
and
wind
all of
and
that. Yeah, that
right.
was what was needed in that part. But you also
Definitely.
have parts of that book that had to have a huge amount of dialogue. So I think it's definitely a balance.
Yeah, for sure. And the fact that so many people were like, I don't want to read that much description. I figured we could talk about,
Interesting.
yeah, I figured we could talk a little bit about description today and how we can actually use it effectively in our writing to the point where our readers aren't like, ugh, like I don't want to read description.
Yeah, I kind of feel like the description is going to fall into that show not tell kind of
Mm,
category,
hmm.
because you're right. You can be boring with
Right.
description.
Yeah.
You can say, like, rather than saying X is wet, you can say something like water dripped down her legs, puddling at her feet type thing. I mean, that's a totally
Exactly.
different, that's not a very good example, but
You know what? No, but I mean, it gets the point across. It's,
yeah,
don't say, oh, I think I talk about it a little bit later, but like, don't like absolutely tell. I don't know. The only thing that I can think of now is your example. So I guess it was a good
yeah.
one.
Okay. Well, I do think that good description helps transport readers into other settings.
Definitely.
It gets their brains going. So you do want to describe in a way that lets their imagination fill in some of the details. Remember
Yes.
that seminar? It was one of the Atlanta writers seminars we went to. And I remember the speaker said something about, you know, too much description of a monster makes it boring, or even in horror movies, when you get to see
Yeah.
it, it's
100%.
the imagination of the reader is going to, you want to leave some
Yes.
information, but you've got to give them cues as to what shape you want it to go.
Absolutely. Yeah, I
Yeah.
agree with that. Like, especially you brought up the horror movie thing. And, I find horror movies scary, for the first 2/3 of the movie. And then for the last third where they reveal what the monster looks like, I'm like, oh, well, that's
Yeah.
not that scary. Like,
Yeah. That's
whatever.
boring.
Like the
They
things that I could
go
picture in
ahead.
my
Yeah.
head, yeah, that I could picture in my head, way scarier than what
Mm-hmm.
they actually came up with CGI and like that
Mm-hmm.
kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So for
Yeah.
sure.
I was, well, now I don't remember what I was going to say, something about horror movies, but
Are you feeling that wine already?
yeah, I've had half the glass already. It's going fast. We aren't even
Oh,
very far into this, but
no.
no, and the older horror movies before they had CGI and that kind of thing, the
Yeah.
effects weren't great, and so those I think were scarier because they had to leave it to the audience's imagination.
Right,
And
right,
so I think there is something to that. So you want to think about the way you describe things. Don't be too great. And just like the movie Saw, I mean, some of you all might love
right,
that movie, but it's gore. That's what it's all about, is just the gore, gore, gore.
right.
And if that's what you're writing, then great, do that. But if that's not what you are wanting your reader to get out of it, you don't want to throw that much gory detail into it. You can use some really good words to get that imagination of your reader thinking something much more horrible than you could ever come up with.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there are 5 areas where you can use description to enhance your writing. And this is from an article called writerswrite.co.za. So
What's
this
ZA?
is, I don't know.
Never heard of that.
I
Huh.
wasn't gonna try to guess
Huh.
where that was
Never
from,
heard
but
of that. Okay.
that's just my ignorance on, domains. So, but I got all of this information in this section from that article, and it was a great article. So you guys should go check it out.
You know what? I think I should start putting our references into our information with when I put
Yeah,
these up. That way
for sure.
our listeners, because we say them, and if they don't have a pen and paper, like if they're driving, they're not, there's no way. So I'll start trying to remember to do that so you all can go look up and read these articles. Some of them are fabulous.
For sure. I also, we could potentially post our notes that we do for our listeners on Patreon. So anybody who,
That's true.
is a supporter on Patreon can have these notes and, be able to look at them, and that would be that.
That's a great idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So description for characters. So descriptions about characters should give your reader something to envision. What is it about this character that your reader should first notice? Like why are you using
Whatever it is
specific
you're using.
description
Yeah.
about your character? Right.
Yeah, because I mean, if your reader can envision your character in their heads, that character becomes real to them. And that's why you've got to do physical descriptions. I do feel, and I think I say this later, that we can do a whole episode on character description.
Oh, absolutely. I think
mean,
we could.
the way you describe someone's hair, and how do you get across, if it's first person, how do you get across what they look like?
Right. Because you don't want to use I looked in a mirror.
I looked in
like
a mirror.
This. Yeah.
I walked by a store window and my hair was disheveled. I mean,
Right. Yeah. No, absolutely.
Yeah.
Can you get across any background information using character descriptions? Like, do they have any obvious scars? Do they dress a particular way?
Mhm.
You can get a lot of information about a character out in the way that they present themselves.
Yeah. I mean, think about in urban fantasy, the main female characters are often leather. They wear leather, they ride motorcycles. You can get a lot of that badass vibe just from that description. And we know, okay, this chick's a badass. That's what you're trying to get across.
Absolutely. Yeah. Also, don't worry too much about eye color. This is something that I am bringing up just because I've seen a lot of posts about it where characters just weirdly notice the eye color of other characters. And if you think about like real life, most people don't really notice eye color on strangers. Like you might be like, oh, well, they have light eyes or they have dark eyes. But if you like pull them aside and you're like, okay, so that person you just met, what color were their eyes? And they're like, I don't know.
Do you even know what your boss's eye color is?
I think Steve's are blue, but again, like, I don't know.
Yeah. My two judges, one of them is light, but I don't know what color it could even be hazel. I have no idea. And I'm in front of these judges every single week for 7 days, every single month. And, so that's a great point. I think I am very guilty of that.
Yeah. So I've made it a point in my books that I write currently not to describe eye color unless there's a reason for it. So, don't mention it unless it's important to the character. And there's some, werewolf books often use like the lightening of eye color or something like that. Too.
Yeah. If it is important like that, like white eyes, like in Game of Thrones, the dead you knew that it was a dead creature if they had the glazed over eyes, or cat irises and a shapeshifter.
Yeah. Definitely.
Or like you said, their eyes, like in Mercy, I think when they get close, when the wolf comes close to the surface, their eyes change, and
color.
And that's an important fact to mention, because then Mercy's like, oh shit, the wolf's right there.
Right.
Urban fantasy probably is going to be have more importance with eye color than others because of that kind of things. We have so many different kinds of creatures and races. Like it might be that one particular race in your world has a particular eye color by saying their eyes were red, oh, well, that's a such and such.
That's a good point. Yeah.
But yeah. Oh, and here's where I was going to say we could probably do a whole episode just on character description, which I think is a fabulous idea, honestly.
Yeah. I think that'd be great. I think it'd be a lot of fun to do. We could even do like multiple attributes in one episode if it looks like they're going to be too short, something. We can figure something out.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
So description and action. So we've talked about this in our pacing and like fighting scene episodes, and probably elsewhere, but
Probably.
don't slow the reader down to add description when there's like intense action taking place. So like I mentioned, fight scenes. I'm not gonna be like, oh wow, that tree was like super old and there are no leaves on it right now. Like, oh, by the way, I'm getting punched in the face.
Yeah.
I'm not going to really focus on the description of that tree in the distance when there's somebody who's trying to murder me. So, instead add details that affect the action outcomes. So, like a table being kicked over if you're in a fight scene. Was the table heavy? Did it hit you? Was it that, like those kinds of details that you can bring more description with in your scene.
Yeah. I mean, I think description like the trickling of blood into their eyes or sweat into their eyes, which might affect the battle because they can't see, where did they go? I'm slashing with my sword, because that's important. And it also gives your reader the insight that, oh, this is a really bad battle because there's blood going everywhere.
Right. Yeah. Like I can't see because of the blood in my eyes. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
You want to accentuate what your character is experiencing. And I think that blood in the eyes is a very good example for that. And also, just thinking about fighting scenes, because apparently that's what my brain decided to do with action. But if the character is wounded and their hands are bloody, then like think about the way that the handle of the weapon they're holding may be slick, or maybe the weight of the weapon is too much to bear because, they can't. And so you get a sense of like, okay, the weapon is heavy.
Yes.
Without having to be like, I picked up this super heavy gun and da 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 da.
I love that slick weapon reference. That is actually brilliant. That is a great way to show the savageness of the battle scene with a simple word. That was one word that you used. It didn't slow down the action. And I got so much out of you saying that one word. I could just envision trying to hold on to the pommel of a sword, the handle of a sword. The pommel's the end, the handle of a sword, and having it slip out of my hands. I mean, that one word, that one descriptive word is brilliant. There are lovely words that, action words that can get those scenes, those ideas across without slowing down your action. And that was a perfect example.
Thank you. But absolutely. Like, I think word choice is incredibly important, especially when talking about something like description. Because the words you choose are going to affect the experience that your reader has.
Absolutely. I love words. I mean,
I do too. I think they're fantastic. I'm not good at them like speaking wise, which is hilarious because we're having a podcast, but I do also absolutely love words and the art of using them. So description and viewpoint, which this one I thought was really interesting because I never think about it consciously, but I think it's one of those things that I do unconsciously or subconsciously as I'm writing.
If you do it unconsciously, that would be interesting. In your dreams? Thanks, Mom. Okay.
I appreciate you.
Move ahead.
Thank you.
I've been drinking, so I feel good now.
Thank you for your input. I value it's, wait. Okay. So descriptions and viewpoint though. So use your character's thoughts to enhance your descriptions. So I think the reason that I do this subconsciously is because I write in first person. I think all of my books are first person. But it can also be done in third person point of view as well.
Right.
But your carrots, I am not even drinking.
It's osmosis.
Wow. Yes, they're traveling. It's traveling through.
We're
Zoom.
Not even in the same city, y'all.
No. My gosh. Okay.
So
but your
carrots,
characters.
yes.
No. Characters. If you say carrots, I'm going to keep saying carrots. Your characters are going to see the world through different lenses. So books might be romanticized and beautiful to one character with full of these stories and information and knowledge, to a character that enjoys reading, while another character or carrot may find them boring or frustrating. And so they might not like books at all. They'll, burn them all, kind of thing.
Right.
So use your characters as a focal point for the description that you want to get across in your novel.
I mean, I think a lot of writers, at least this is true for me, I'm in that character's space. I mean, I am that character when I'm writing, and in my head I'm seeing what they're seeing, which is why I love to write so much. I am totally
Yeah.
transported somewhere else.
Yeah.
So here I am sitting at my little computer, but I'm really in this tavern looking at the potatoes on that plate over there. I mean,
Definitely.
and so I do write from that point of view.
Yeah.
So just if you do that like I do, me personally, I have a whole lot of things going on in my brain, which is not really great for writing your character.
Yeah.
You don't want a character that thinks like I do in real life. So just be careful when you're writing description from that viewpoint to try to, and this may happen on your second draft, because the first draft, you're just trying to get through it, but go back and make sure it's normal. Because I'm not normal. And so you have to go back and make sure that it represents what you want your character to represent.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's all about and I've said it, I think 3 times already this episode, but it's all about the experience that you want your reader to have.
Yes.
What information do you want them to glean from these descriptions that you're using?
I mean, they do tell us, write for yourself, but
oh, for sure.
But there's also, if you're wanting to sell it, you do have to fix it to the point where it would be enjoyable to someone else instead of just, me, who's very strange.
That is a fair point.
Right.
That is a fair point.
Right.
Also description using emotion. So, this is that kind of, you mentioned it earlier, the show don't tell advice that we always talk about.
Yeah.
And that any writing advice pretty much talks about is, you don't want to simply tell the audience that your character is sad.
Yeah. Yeah. That's exactly what I was talking about. I mean, because you get it across, and sometimes that might be enough. If you're writing a particular scene that you've really got to get to the next thing, saying they're sad might work, but rarely.
Right. Right.
So think about that.
And there are different ways to go about it too. Is one character talking about another character and they're saying, oh, well, she's sad. That obviously works because that's dialogue, and you're not trying to get across the fact that that character is sad through, description or what have you. But if you are trying to use description or trying to describe how a character feels, then, they are sad isn't quite enough to make that stick in your reader's mind.
Right.
A lot of the time. I think it can be sometimes. But you want to show your character's tears tracking down their face. Or the sobs that shake their shoulders,
or the salty taste. If you want to try to bring taste into it, the salty taste as the tears drip into their mouths or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. And we have done a whole episode on show don't tell, and that's episode 26. I actually remember to go and look it up.
She looked it up. All right.
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
Next I have description using pacing for oh gosh, I'm not drinking. This is not how my brain is supposed to work right now.
I'm sorry for the osmosis.
Oh, I honestly think it's just, trying to write my thesis and do a billion other things. But using pacing in order to get across descriptions in a way that you want to in your novel. So we've talked about pacing. We just did an episode on that one in 102, I think. And so you just want to use pacing to kind of switch up the way that you describe your scenes in order to make them pop to your reader. So I did put this in the notes. We did talk about it in episode 102. But this is more about using sentence length and punctuation, yes, to accent the descriptions that you want your reader to experience.
Well, and even there are descriptive words that are 1-syllable words that help things move fast too.
Absolutely.
So yes, you can pick descriptive words that fit the pace that you need at that time. I really think that what's at the root of description is you need to, you look at the scene, paragraph, or sentence that you're about to write or that you're trying to get across, and determine exactly what it is you're trying to convey. What is it in this scene I'm about to do that I'm trying to convey? You think of the colors, the textures, the shapes, the feeling of whatever it is you're trying to describe, and don't name them.
Yeah.
Simply picture that in your mind's eye and observe.
Yes. Yeah.
And that is a great way to get down to the basics of what description you need for that particular scene.
Yeah, that's a really good tip. I like that.
Yeah, me too.
I also found a really good article with 5 more tips on writing good descriptions. Maybe I should just slow down my talking. Maybe I'm just like trying to talk too fast.
We do get excited about our topics, and we do talk fast.
I do. So this article that I found is self-publishingschool.com. And it was also extremely good. Lots of detail that I'm not going to include here just because I don't want to ramble on for the next 3 hours. I'm sure you guys would love that. But if you're interested in more detail, go and check that out. So the first tip was to utilize the 5 senses. And you brought up a really good example with the salty taste of tears, to express sadness.
Well, and the copper of blood, but you also don't want to be cliche. Try to come up with something. I love it when I'm reading a book and they describe something in a way I've never thought of before. I'm like, of course, you don't want to take your character out of the story either, but anyway, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, you're good. I love that. But yeah, we use all of our senses every day. We've talked about using the senses on several episodes of this podcast. But there is a reason, and that's because we all use our senses every day. And many writers focus on description involving sight, but think about smells and sounds and feelings like temperature changes and rough surfaces and that
taste.
kind of thing. Exactly.
Yeah.
You can submerge was the word that came to my mind as I was writing these notes, and I guess it kind of fits, but you can submerge your reader into your novel by immerse your reader.
Immerse. I got
it.
Submerge works.
It works ish. There's better words out there, but it's fine. You can immerse your reader into your novel by giving them a whole sense of the scene using all of the senses.
Yeah.
The next tip is to include what's relevant. And this is the part that I think that most writers really want to know about when we talk about how do you write description for your book? How do I know what descriptions are relevant? Which ones are extraneous? What should I keep in? What is necessary? What do I take out? That kind of
thing. Like you were talking about the tree. I mean, in the battle scene, that tree, I like the tree.
A cool tree.
And in my mind, one of my 50 million personalities might think that tree is the coolest thing. But like you said, there's appropriate times for certain facts to come out.
Definitely.
So good point. Yeah.
And I think this is kind of where that post that I mentioned earlier comes in, the dialogue versus description post. I think it comes in a little bit here because, if you add too much description, like you said, it can be boring. It'll bog down your scene and, your reader may resort to skimming instead of taking in any detail, which is something that I saw in that post.
I have done that for sure.
Yeah.
And sometimes, which is really funny because I like reading romances, but sometimes I get to a sex scene and I'm like, and I just skim through. Yeah, I know what they're doing.
Yeah.
And I go through it or battle scenes like Raymond Feist is an excellent author. I don't know if you've read any of his books, but
but I've heard of him.
Very technical writer.
Yeah.
Your dad loves it. I mean, he is brilliant. Like Uncle Cliff, that's that type of writing. Uncle Cliff writes that way, a very technical type of writing. But for me, that military stuff is a bit over my head. I just need to know where the army's going to be and, what's going to happen. I don't need to know about the ranks and the, and that kind of thing. So I'm very guilty of skimming through those things. And those are all excellent writers. So, for us as new writers, we need to, wouldn't say we're new writers. We've written forever, but we're not published. So, but, you do need to be aware that your description could bog down your reader.
Definitely.
And you don't want them skimming your book. There shouldn't be anything in your book that is skimmable.
Right. Exactly.
Every
you
word
want everything
should
to be very
important. Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly like you just said, think about which details are important. Do I need 3 pages about the ornate swirls on that door? Or, can I be told that it's an ornate wooden door? And what's interesting about it is the purely golden doorknob or the sounds that are coming from beyond the door. Is there something else that is more interesting, more relevant, and more pertinent to the story?
Or, maybe the swirls on the door become a portal if you push them a certain way, but you've got to, if that's the case, you shouldn't be leaving your reader wondering, why the hell are you telling me 3 pages about this door? You don't if they skim it, are they going to miss the point of what you were
Right.
trying to make? So yeah, be really careful in describing that.
Definitely. Also, less is often more in the case of writing description. You know, you were talking earlier about the monsters in the horror
Mm-hmm.
movies. You know, you want your reader to fill in some of the blanks. You don't want them to, have everything at their fingertips, because then there's no intrigue, I guess.
Yeah. And, I'm a sucker. Sucker's not the right word. I'm a slave, I suppose, to using a thesaurus,
Mm-hmm.
because my brain will come up like you with that word that you meant, immerse.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, my brain will do that too. And that's not the word I mean. And so I have my thesaurus.com up all the time on my
Yeah.
computer. I mean,
Yeah.
I go to it constantly for fiction writing, for every kind of writing, that even when I do like my Etsy store and I'm putting up a new item, I'm like, what is the
Yeah.
word that makes this sound more interesting? Thesaurus, man, I am a
Yeah.
slave to
Yeah.
that. So great use, great source for descriptive
Absolutely.
terms anyway.
Yeah, no, I agree. I am also a slave to the thesaurus. I have
Does
it bookmarked everywhere.
doesn't Angela Piglucci, the girls that
Yeah, yeah,
we have,
yeah.
don't they have a description thesaurus?
They might. I
I
will
bet
have to
they
go look at my
do.
bookshelf. Yeah,
I bet they do.
yeah.
So definitely go buy all their books, because
Definitely buy all their
you
books. They're
will use
great.
them 100%.
Or
I
maybe start with
guarantee it.
just one just to make sure you like it. I don't,
I
you
mean,
know.
I don't see how anybody can't like those
I mean,
books.
agreed, agreed. I love those books,
Me
but
too. But I think they really do have a description thesaurus, and all of their books are thesaurus like anyway. So if, like, for their urban books,
mhm,
there's a description on how to describe an alley in a city,
right.
ideas for descriptions, and it's invaluable. I almost said valuable.
Yeah,
It's valuable. Well, it is
it
valuable,
is valuable.
but it's invaluable too. I'm going to let you talk for a little bit.
it's, pro- it's probably a good idea.
I think so.
Uh, write what your character would naturally observe. So this calls back to my previous tip about viewpoint and point of view. Characters often have routines. Everybody wakes up in the morning and wanders to the bathroom and all that kind of stuff. But like every time they look into a mirror, they're not going to always think about their features and how would I describe myself? And I have
Mm-hmm.
brown hair and I have green eyes. And, characters don't do that. So you probably not going to want to make a description about a character based on like them looking at themselves in the mirror every morning.
Yeah, that's probably no. When I look in the mirror in the morning, it's more like, holy shit, I look like crap today. What did I do? Which is not what you're trying to get across with the description of your character.
Right. No, exactly. Characters are not going to notice every single detail also about every person,
Mm-hmm.
every design, every room, every place that they come across. That's just, it's far too much information to take in. Nobody is really going to notice all of those details and keep them in mind. So think about what catches the eye of your character first and think about why, and is it important, and use that for descriptions.
Yeah, I'm very non-aware. Only somebody like Sherlock Holmes, which if you're writing a Sherlock Holmes character, yes, he does
True.
notice everything in that room.
Yeah.
But the rest of us, pretty much not. I'm excited just to get through the door without falling down.
Fair enough. Yes, Miss Broken Feet.
I know. I go to the doctor this week. Hopefully he'll tell me it's repaired. We'll see.
Good. Yeah. The next tip that I have is one of my favorites, and it's to spread out your descriptions. You don't want to, again, bog down your reader. So you don't want a long paragraph or a few pages about what a room looks like or how it's set up. Instead, spread out the description across the scene as action unfolds. You want to use character action to reveal details of your scene.
That's a really good point. It kind of borderlines on the info dump.
Yeah,
if
for
you
sure.
try to do it that way, which I'm guilty of too. I am horrible with the info dump. So, when I start a new scene, I want everybody to know what this library looks like and all the books are, that's not what you notice when you go into a library. You might notice the smell. I love the smell
I might
of
notice
a library.
the books in a library.
I mean, I would notice the books, but not, the way I info dump everything.
Fair enough. Yeah.
I'm working on that.
Fair enough. Yeah, and then the example that I came up with, which arguably is not a good example, but John picked up the candle that rested on the table instead of mentioning the candle in the initial description of the room. So, if John walks
Oh.
into the room, is he going to really care about that candle, or is he going to need to pick it up later? So,
Mhm.
we can get across that there's a candle on the table when he goes to pick up the candle, unless he's specifically walking into the room for that candle, if that
Or
makes sense.
unless the room is so dark that the only light he could see was coming from the
Was the
feeble
candle.
candle. It just depends on what you're trying
Right.
to get across. Yeah, good
Right.
point.
But
Good
the
point.
point is, your character can interact with their surroundings in order to get across description of the room instead of just describing the entire room.
There was a candle on the table. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I gotcha.
So
Okay.
this is going to help you keep your reader engaged and learning new information about the place that they found themselves in. So you're going to be able to reveal more information about the scene across character action, which is going to be way more engaging than just spelling it out.
Right.
This last tip that I found in this article made me laugh because all it said was, "Don't be boring." And I'm like, "Oh, okay, like sure, I'll just do that. Like I'll make sure that I'm not boring." But how?
Yeah.
So, well, we as writers can get caught up in our world building, and
Yeah.
we can
I don't
add
think we ever think we're boring. So how do we know
exactly.
if we're boring?
It's like,
Right.
sure, I'll just be not boring. I'll just do that. No, but like we can get caught up in our world building and we can add details that don't necessarily matter to the story or our characters, but we like them because we think they're really cool. And they probably are. They're probably really, really cool. I'm definitely guilty of this sometimes. I have a lot of details in my books that I just think are the bee's knees, and I want to use them, and I want the reader to think that they're also cool. But according to this article, quote unquote, readers don't care. Which I take that to mean we can easily become overwhelmed or bored with detail that isn't interesting to the story we're trying to immerse ourselves in.
Okay.
So from a reader's standpoint, I can definitely see, I don't really care about that extraneous detail. Tell me why I care.
Yeah, that's true. Okay.
Yeah. So, I've read books where I just kind of mentally sigh at the amount of description. Like you said, you skim through a lot of the technical terms of things that you're not necessarily immersed in or not well versed in, that kind of thing. So, for me, I'm like, please tell me why I care about that tree outside the window instead of just describing it for several paragraphs.
For all we talk about Patricia Briggs, it was one of the Alpha and Omega books in her series where she got very into the horse training and all of that, which I like horses.
Yeah.
But I am not. She loves horses. They are a huge part of her life in the real world, right?
Yeah.
And so some of that detail I did find a little bit boring, which is not something you can often say about Patricia Briggs' works.
Yeah, I do. It's interesting. I just reread that entire series within the past few months and got to that book. And I remember thinking that the first time that I read it, but the second time around, I was not ever bored with any of the description.
Okay. It's so not that I was bored by it. I just
don't understand it.
It was that I don't care.
Yeah.
Which is those are words that do not come out of your mouth when you're reading a Patricia Briggs book. So, but that was the only book that ever, and it's because of her love of that in the real world. And it came through into this book because she loves it so much.
Yeah.
Which is wonderful. But as writers, we need to be aware of that.
Definitely. I have a character that I'm working on right now, and she's a grad student because I don't know, it's something that I know.
And, yeah.
She's a grad student and she's actually in a program of study for magic, but I know how all of the grad student, stuff works, like you have an advisor and you have all these exams and you have orals and you have, written exams that, determine whether or not you can be a candidate. And I have to be careful about going into detail on that stuff because a lot of people are probably not going to give a crap about whether or not she's a PhD candidate versus just a PhD student,
Yeah, they're not going to care. But for you, the details.
Yes,
yeah. That's very good point. Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Now I have just a few more miscellaneous tips.
I thought you said mischievous tips. I got
Not
really
quite.
excited for a minute to find out what mischievous tips you were going to tell us. I want
No.
mischievous tips.
I hope you have some of your own. I don't. I have miscellaneous tips.
Okay, tell us your miscellaneous tips. Sorry about that. I was just
Maybe
so
they're
excited there for a
mischievous.
minute. Okay, so I've almost finished my wine now.
Ooh, yep, that's good.
Okay.
So the first one I have is be specific in your descriptions. You know, unless your character can't, for whatever reason, provide specific details in any capacity, like maybe they were drugged or something like that. But
You know, that's interesting, writing a drugged scene. You know,
mhm,
that happens a lot in stories that we see, and even urban
mhm,
fantasy and not urban
yeah,
fantasy, where they're drugged. And I've never been in that position. So how do we
right,
describe that? You know,
definitely.
interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So just like you want to be specific. You know, your word choice, like I mentioned earlier, is super important. You can create specific tones and moods with the descriptions in your scenes, and that's going to be reliant on the specificity. You don't want to be super vague because then your reader's not going
Right.
to be able to envision a scene, and they're not going to be able to picture, you know, where exactly your character is and what they're doing, and you know, the setting. You know, and the setting is super important.
True.
Intertwine description and action. So I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but let your characters interact with the scene and your reader's going to follow. And I think this one is just very important. And the reason I'm saying it again is just because it's a good way to make description feel organic. Um, you know, you don't have to describe like, oh yes, that door that's in my way is a large double door and it's brown and it's got swirls and it was obviously hand carved and I think it's 100 years old and I, you know, like that's just again gonna bore your reader. Whereas if you have your character walk up and try to open the door and it's heavy
And it creaks
and
as,
they
you
have to
know,
put
under his
effort,
weight. Yeah.
right? So, you know, let your characters interact with your scene in order to get across what is in your scene, if that, you know, kind of makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. You know, I think we've talked before about talking heads when we were
Yeah,
talking about
yeah.
dialogue. Well, kind of in this the same thing with description. If your scene doesn't feel like it has a place, like it's
Hmm.
just the actors are just speaking in some blank white room,
Yeah,
rather than just the talking head that we were talking about for dialogue, but the actual room, you aren't going to be able to get that sense of place back later.
right.
So
Yeah.
do it early. Start with your description of where you are early.
That's a really, really good point
Mm-hmm.
because, you know, one of the tips I think, you know, we've talked about a billion things on this podcast, but there was one where it's, you know, you don't want to start off a book with a character just running away from something
Right.
or start off with like really intense dialogue because your reader is going to be like, well, where are
are
we
we?
running from? Like,
Yeah.
where are we? Are we in the woods? Are we in a city?
Yeah, it's that
Um,
talking head things, but it
yeah,
goes to description as well.
definitely. And so
Yeah.
your character, your reader is going to feel a little bit lost
Mm-hmm.
without something to ground them in a scene. That's a really good point.
Thank you.
Avoid excessive name dropping when describing a character. You know, you don't want to say John over and over. John has brown hair and John wore a red shirt and John thinks that he's the best guy ever. You know, you want to avoid that. It gets repetitive. Was just one tip that I saw.
Mm-hmm.
Don't let description hang you up on a first draft. You know, my first drafts are often
Right.
pretty skeletal. They feel pretty dry bones. There's not a lot of meat to it. They lack a lot of that juicy description. So it's really my rewrite where I shine on adding descriptions to enhance my story. So don't worry too much if your first draft is.
Yeah, you're a lot of times just trying to get from point A to point B in that first draft because you know where the story has to go. So definitely you rewrite. I just go back and I need to learn to rewrite because I think that's probably the way to go. I think you're probably more advanced than I am in the writing scene.
I don't know. Everybody writes differently. So.
Everybody does have their own way to do things, but I don't feel comfortable moving on from a scene until I have done that fleshing out I mean, obviously it's still a first draft when I get done, but I do more fleshing during the writing of the original scene than you do.
Yeah. For sure.
you want to tell your reader where they are within a paragraph or so.
Yeah,
Close to the start of that scene, that early paragraph needs to have enough detail that, say you're creating a coffee shop, that it should feel like its own place, something that you actually as a human being can envision walking into.
yeah,
It's got its own mood, its color. You got to give enough detail that your reader feels like they're in that spot.
definitely.
One vivid descriptive detail will do more work for you than three beautifully ornate sentences that don't tell them description.
Absolutely. I mean, like you said, and this isn't necessarily about setting, but it can apply. But like the slick
Mm-hmm.
handle of the sword, like you said, it brings about a way, or an imagery of like there's blood everywhere. This is really intense.
Mm-hmm.
The weapon is slipping out of my hand. That's a lot of information to get across with the handle was slick.
Yeah. Yeah.
As you're trying to fight.
Yeah.
Also utilize beta readers. I think
Mm-hmm.
we have started saying this almost every single episode because they are just so important.
Invaluable. They're valuable and
And
invaluable.
invaluable. Absolutely. But they can tell you when there's too much description versus too little. I think every single one of my first drafts that you read, you tell me it feels a little skeletal. And then
Yeah.
you read my rewrite and you're like, that was really good. And I'm like, all right, cool.
Louis and Delaney's the only one that wasn't skeletal on the first
Well,
draft.
and then
it was
I
ready
rewrote
to
that one.
publish. It was ready to publish first time you wrote it.
Well, now it's
redone,
better,
and I still
in my
haven't read it
opinion.
yet. I have to
I know.
read it.
Yeah. Try descriptive exercises. I like this one. I like writing exercises. I think they're a really great way to stretch those writer muscles and, kind of get them going a little bit. Write a paragraph specifically meant to describe a place or person or thing to practice getting down details and important details and necessary details.
Yeah, we do this with our paragraph writing. I mean, sometimes our paragraph writing is just to write in general, just to get us writing again.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's actually to work on something specific like description. Let's work on description in this one. And then, we've come up with some really beautiful sentences.
We do, yeah.
In our paragraph writing. I did find an example in the writersdigest.com, which is also a wonderful resource.
Yeah.
So instead of writing the lake glittered in the light of the setting sun, which actually that's a pretty good sentence.
Yeah.
This was I think this is a bit over the top, but this was what they said to write instead. As the tip of the sun was about to slip below the green hills, stretching in layered curves along the horizon, the lake caught its setting light, and glittering streaks of mauve and orange squirmed across the black surface with undulations of waves like worms of celestial fire.
I agree with you. I think a little bit of that is
overdone.
Too much. Yeah.
But I think it's illustrative of what you can do with that simple sentence to make it more descriptive.
Absolutely. I agree.
And then one last thought that I have, and then that's all I've got, is you were talking about writing exercises.
Yeah.
Take that one step further and keep a description journal.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Which we all of us writers, there's memes everywhere about writers and their little journals. I mean,
yes.
It's a thing.
It is a thing. We have a whole episode on writers' journals.
We do. But keep a description journal, carry it with you. Take it out if you're sitting on lunch break or you're waiting for a doctor appointment. Describe your surroundings.
Yeah.
Describe a TV character. Describe, people watch, which I love to do. Go to the airport, watch people, and describe them. Describe different locations, buildings. Notice architecture. Notice the doors and how people travel through different areas. Notice activities. One article I read said to copy down descriptions from books that you like, because just the act of rewriting that scene will help you see what descriptive words they use.
I do that actually. Yes, I have written down quotes that Patricia Briggs has written because
she's brilliant.
The way that she describes things, sometimes I'm like, how did you even come up with that? Like, how did you even think to put words together in that way and start the sentence that way? And so I've started I say I've started this, I've been doing this for a while, but like I will write down quotes that really get me where I'm like, oh, that was a really great way to describe that or to bring in that description. So yeah, that I stand by that tip. That's a really good
Yeah, I
tip.
mean, so keep it in a specific journal that's just for description. So
Yeah.
that I'm having description issues. I need to work on that. You pull out that journal and that's got all of that in it. I mean, as writers, we can have lots of journals. We can have multiple journals for multiple reasons and carry them all with us. I don't even know how many unopened journals I've got. I
I have a
mean,
lot. Yeah.
I do too. I love journals.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but that's all I've got.
That is all I had. I do have an interview question for you, like I
Okay.
do. What sense of the five senses, other than sight and sound, do you use the most in your writing? And which do you think that you need to use more?
I think that I have an issue with not using the others other than sight and sound enough.
Right.
I think I use taste probably the most.
Oh, yeah.
And urban fantasy and high fantasy, I'm all about the food.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
was raised on Dragonlance series, and I still remember Tika's potatoes. One of our listeners is going to know exactly what I'm talking about. Tika's potatoes and the smell of them and the taste of them. I just can't get enough of that. And
Yeah.
so I like using that. I probably need to work on everything other than sight and sound. I think sight and sound comes automatically,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
I
I think it
often
does for most
forget
writers.
about the taste and the feel and the smells.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
I think the sense that I use the most is it's not quite touch, but it's feeling. So like temperature changes, I do a lot. You know, if it's cold outside or the gush of warm air as I walk indoors, you know, I write that type of thing
I need to do
for
that more. Yeah.
a lot of my characters, you know, and I've realized that in a lot of my books, I really enjoy writing colder weather.
Me
Um,
too. That's my favorite time. Oh, that's a
yeah.
great interview question. What's your favorite time of year to write about?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Well, I use the fall a lot.
me too.
The book that I just finished was Summer in Charleston, South Carolina. So there was
Mm,
always the sweaty, sticky, just
hot,
like the
humid.
heat,
Hmm.
yeah, of getting, you know, of the wonderful South that
Yeah,
we have.
Kata started in Atlanta in the summer.
Yeah,
So she had
yeah,
the sweat and the heat and the humidity.
definitely. And then also, I think I use, you know, I use the weather a lot to describe how my character is feeling. So I think my character is like tactile
Oh,
feelings, you know, so you know, again, the weather, so like the humidity and the heat of
which
Charleston.
is also symbolism and stuff. So you're pulling all that in there. That's amazing.
Right. And then also, well, thank you.
Hmm.
And also the rain in Savannah in spring I used in my MacBook.
Hmm.
So she ended up caught in the rain a lot. She would end up falling in mud and it'd be sticky and she's trying to, you know, get the mud off. So I think I use like that kind of those kinds of senses.
As horrible as you make that sound, I love Savannah and I want to go back.
Yeah, I know. And the rain there is terrible sometimes, I hear.
I mean,
We know we've
we've
walked around
been,
in
I
it,
mean,
but
when we go, when is it that we usually go, we used to go during the summer. We would go to
yes.
Tybee Island as a family and we would spend at least one day in Savannah,
Yeah.
and it never failed. There would be a thunderstorm and we'd be ducking into, oh, a bar to have a drink.
Yep.
Oh,
Oh
darn. Oh,
no.
no.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, Savannah is a wet city for sure.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
I think the sense that I should probably work on more would probably be taste. Because I think I use mostly the cliche, like the taste of blood, the copper taste of
Right,
blood in the
right.
mouth whenever I'm writing like a fighting scene and you
This
get punched in the teeth.
surprises me because Mac is a chef. So I would think that in that book, at least you use taste a lot.
You would think so, and I don't think I do that much.
Huh.
Yeah, you would think. But yeah, I don't think I do. I think
Because to
she's
me, I would think that even her analogies in her mind would be about taste.
I agree. And I think that might be something that I need to work on in that book. Like I think that's
Is that
something
one done, or are you still rewriting, or
it's done. I think it needs a rewrite because you know how I am
you
as a human.
rewrite a lot? Yes, ma'am.
I've it's the draft that I have is still the very first draft. So
Okay. That you
It
haven't
needs-
rewritten it at all yet.
Right.
Okay. I gotcha.
So
I'm
use
envious
one.
that you and your busy, huge, amazing life with fiance and school and work and all that you're able to write. I need to
It-
somehow get my act together. I guess.
No, I think writing is very therapeutic for me. It like you said, it's a very good escape. I get a chance to work on something that's not school for once. And I think that's been super helpful in keeping me sane-ish as I'm trying to get towards graduation.
Are you though?
No, not at all.
Oh, that's funny.
Good grief. I do have a sentence challenge for those of you who are interested in participating. So basically just take this sentence and use it in any piece of work. I typically like to write a whole brand new piece of work, and I limit myself to 1 page because I like for it to be a challenge. So this week's sentence is, you expect me to notice things?
And email them to us. And at some point,
Yeah,
we're going
email
to
them to us.
compile all of the stuff that y'all have sent us and do an episode, listener episode with what you all have sent us. So yeah, email them to us.
Please do. So that's all I had.
Mhm.
I wrote down the outro today.
Woohoo!
Yeah, to make it a little bit easier on myself. Thank you guys for listening so much. That one's easy. I didn't have to write that part down. We super appreciate you guys. You know, we're super thrilled to talk about writing and talk in general, obviously. So
Yeah, we like to talk.
We talk a lot.
Mm.
Come check out our website at eatdrinkwritepodcast.com. Follow us on all of our social media. We've got all the good stuff like Twitter, Facebook, Insta, Pinterest, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You can find all of those on our website. And also the best way to get in touch with us, we love reading all of your comments, but the best way to get in touch with us is via our email at eat.drink.write.podcast@gmail.com. Also, if you would like to support us as we continue on our podcasting journey, check out our Patreon at patreon.com/EDW podcast. We're super grateful to the Patreons that we have already. And we just got another this week. Nikki, thank you so much.
Thank
We're
you, Nikki.
super thrilled.
Woo!
We always do a little celebration. You email it to me and we both cheer. It's fantastic. We love our Patreons.
You all. Yes.
Thank you very much. But thank you guys for your support. Helps us keep doing these episodes. And thank you guys for listening. We super appreciate it.
And we'll see you next week.
See you next week.